Let's talk about the war. War. Do you think it's really that shocking that after the and still during the pandemic, it's the getting close to the end of it, I suppose. Is it still surprising that a country leader would figure out how damaged the everybody is, all the planet is, in regards to people in the pandemic and everything, that it is strategically a very good timing to invade?
I think if we're going to get into politics and motivations, I think it's been in this individual's mindset for decades to expand what he seems to believe to be his country's rightful heritage. I also think that for more decades, the world has been in a period of what is sometimes referred to as phase transition, but these days is referred to more as a shift. I think the more recent references to the shift have been a bit misplaced because it seems to suggest or imply that it's something that's happening very quickly. And in our time frame reference, it's it's not happening that quickly. From a bigger perspective, considering that the world has been around for a very long time, things that may be transitioning to a more positive place in this case could be taking many, many decades, but are still very profound. When such things happen, it is considered common for negativity to try to rise up to meet that energy, that shifting positive energy, shift to a more positive energy. It's very possible, it's hard to know from our perspective, but it's very possible that that this is what's going on. That as bad as it seems, and it does seem very bad from a lot of perspectives, that this is one of the last attempts for negative energies to be coming up to try to secure a greater foothold before it becomes impossible for that to happen again. And this isn't to say necessarily that any particular individual is the embodiment of negativity, as much as it is the behavior of such individuals that is getting supported by those more subtle negative influences that are trying to hold on, that is being manifest in such behavior. So yeah, I do think that it is quite possible that the forces that be, so to speak, see a vulnerability and are looking to take advantage of the vulnerabilities in collective health, because that has an impact on either the invulnerability or the vulnerability in collective consciousness.
Yeah, I did. I think it took a long time. I thought this was going to happen earlier. Not particularly what country that it's happening in,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw the world being, how do you say, fragile
Yes.
because of the pandemic, and I thought, oh, strategically speaking, this is such a good time to invade. If you're playing the game war.
Well, sure, and we see other countries that have that not so long ago that were getting a great deal of attention because of their behavior in other parts of the world are getting much less attention. Whether that's good or bad or has yet to be seen, is of also additional concern. every national leader and world leader needs to prioritize what is that it is natural for each leader to prioritize what they see to be most important for the welfare of their constituents, and for and less directly but still significantly for the rest of the world. There's an old expression, an old Vedic expression, that I personally wish was embraced more thoroughly, that the world is my family. And I think that we will see more and more of that in decision making, and we need to see more and more of that kind of thing in decision making in world leaders, whether large or small. Right now, there is enormous amount of support going on throughout almost every country of the world for
Ukraine.
It's for the people. It isn't necessarily for the government.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be transplanted to the government, but at the same time, it's the people that are getting the compassion.
Which is wonderful.
It is wonderful. And I think that the other parties involved, deliberately not mentioning names too much, the other parties involved did not anticipate both the populist sentiment around the world for this, as well as the strength, although it's not definitive, but the strength of the response from other governments, economically, in some cases militarily. It isn't definitive, and it's hard to know whether or not, if it becomes more definitive, if that becomes a bigger problem or reduces the problem. But it seems like, from most analysts' comments, that this was not anticipated. The solidarity, although it isn't completely solidarity, but the extent of the solidarity that's been seen is seemingly unanticipated. However, with all that said, that individual and that government do not have a long history of actually caring to what extent the world thinks and feels about such things.
Yeah, there's that.
But economically, it could have an impact. The hope is that, for my hope, is that the what we're seeing manifest in the world in response to what's going on in Ukraine and elsewhere is a sign of growing collective consciousness. Is it enough to resolve all of this? Unlikely, but it may be a symptom that it could get there. You know, the whole thoughts and prayers thing is nice and maybe has some effect, but if thoughts and prayers really worked so well, we wouldn't have these problems over and over again. So there has to be more to it. Spiritual practices can make these things more potent, make the thoughts, the prayers, the intentions more potent. And the collective practice of such spiritual practices, group practice, and coordinated synchronized group practices, you're seeing from many different organizations and communities, organized, synchronized group meditations. It should, and I think will, have an impact.
Because it has before.
Yeah, it has before, and there are more people that are so inclined now than ever before. It's hoping that there is enough quality of that collective consciousness that it will neutralize these negative tendencies, not just delay them, but neutralize them to such an extent that, and this is the critical thing, that it's not just to set things back the way they were, but to actually create the qualities of adaptability and integration that comes from such purification, so that new and higher level systems and thinking can then become more prominent and predominant. That's my soapbox.
Yeah, but thinking that in order for us to move forward into a better world, all the positivity that's generated and now the negativity rising to meet it, as its last recourse, this last chance of doing so.
Yeah, one of the last.
Does that mean you believe not always lost? We won't really be in a nuclear war and end this planet.
Well, as is commonly said these days, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. I don't think it's necessarily the case that we won't see nuclear activity, unfortunately. Does that mean the end of all things? It doesn't necessarily mean the end of all things. It could create a shock that then wakes us up even more. It could. I'm in no way suggesting that is the best way to go. But I heard an analogy many years ago from a spiritual speaker who was being asked at the time about issues, very intense issues that could have very much gotten worse going on in the Middle East. And his response was, when you go to extract the honey, in other words, in this case, the more positive things, when you go to make that more available, the bees get very excited, and there's a lot of flying around and a lot of buzzing and a lot of what could be viewed as negativity, stinging and biting and anything else, and it's in natural response to the bringing forth of the honey.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and all analogies have their weaknesses, but we may see something that we can't see now. What is the positive that is behind all this? It may be that all of these aggressive type behaviors, and they're not limited to one party or one country. That's a naive presentation by a lot of the media that there's only one good guy and only one bad guy. There are things that underlie all this that go way, way back. It doesn't mean that any of it's justified, but it could mean, or it could represent, that several different aspects of the systems that have been entrenched in our world are getting, or will be getting, readjusted. And this more violent manifestation of it all could be, like they say, it takes a thorn to remove a thorn sometimes. So, very hard to know, but from the bigger point of view, and if we continue to embrace that things are all in all destined to be better, then what are the dynamics behind all this? That would be the interesting consideration. And it could be that a lot of things that we think are just entrenched in the world are just going to be re-examined because of the trauma that is being experienced, and may even get worse in the coming days and weeks. No one was able, or very few, were able to predict that the Berlin Wall was going to fall as quickly as it did and all that it represented. And yet, almost overnight, that which was unthinkable became the reality. Did it change everything? Well, for some people it did, and in many ways it did. But obviously there are still many things going on in the world that are left over from the thinking on both sides of that wall. There isn't one right answer and one wrong answer. There are degrees of need for re-examination and restructuring. And maybe that's what's happening now.
But you don't think the world is going to end? You don't think it's going to be anything big enough to... You don't believe in that possibility?
If you mean completely end,
nuclear war everywhere.
No, I don't. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely. I think it's more possible now than it was 2 weeks ago, but I still don't think it's anywhere near 100%.
And what makes wars wars? What makes it happen? Is it the masculine energy that likes to destroy? Is the man in power that only think that way? Destruction instead of women thinking of creation?
I think a lot of that goes into this dynamic. I think that you don't have a balance in the world of the feminine and the masculine, and whenever there's imbalance, there is the violation of the laws of nature, and that creates more imbalance. That turns to more violation of the laws of nature, and so the level of on the realm of behavior. It just looks like a never-ending cycle of getting worse. So you have to transcend the realm of behavior and go to the consciousness. And the more people are able to connect to that level, the more the roots of behavior get infused with the balance of, in this case, the feminine and the masculine. There's another analysis that has come from some Eastern thinking as well, that a lot of the problems that we're experiencing these days, pandemic, famine, abuse of climate, disrespecting the earth, war, on a metaphysical level is connected to excess greed. And it is probably accurate to say that very much is connected with an overabundance of the masculine energy. Whether it's in a man or a woman, but most of the overabundance would be in men.
Women should be the leaders. When did we let men take over? We were the leaders in the beginning. Let the men take over. Look at the mess we're in still. Sad.
I heard it once asked another spiritual leader whether or not he endorsed and believed, this was back in the 70s, in equal rights for women. And his response, maybe not uniquely, but his response was essentially, why would you want to lower the rights of women to the rights of men?
Yeah, why would
you want to lower the status?
Why would women want to lower their status?
Yeah.
Perfect.